Well, hello, everybody. My name is Jennifer Wolf. I'm really excited to be sharing this information, this presentation with you today. It's one that I've kind of been thinking over and mulling over, and so when I had the opportunity to kind of put this together, I was excited to pull together some resources. And so I hope it will be beneficial in our kind of continuing conversation about coping with COVID. We've also just talked about other traumas and other adversity. And so today we want to talk about flourishing after adversity and how we can actually experience post-traumatic growth, which seems like a paradox, but I'm hoping it'll be clear afterwards that, you know, sometimes we grow stronger after going through hard things. Just a little bit of background about me. I work during the day for Lucas County Board of Developmental Disabilities as a training coordinator. I'm also privileged to sit on the advisory board for the Lucas County Trauma-Informed Care Coalition, where I do a lot of training on trauma-informed care and how agencies can be more trauma-informed. I also teach for Spring Arbor at night. So that's kind of a little bit about me, and I'm glad to be here with you. And looks like, I think I got everybody in from the waiting room. So, okay, so we will get started. All right, so like I said, I train on trauma, and so I kind of felt like I should give a little bit of a background on trauma. Just a brief definition of trauma. This is kind of the go-to definition from SAMHSA, which says that individual trauma comes from an event or a series of events that is experienced by someone as harmful in some way, physically, emotionally, some kind of a threat. And it can have lasting adverse effects on that person in many different categories. It might be physical, social, emotional, also spiritual. And it could be a combination of those or just kind of to one category. So trauma is in the eye of the beholder. Two people could experience the same negative event and have very different effects. And there's lots of reasons for that, lots of variations, but a lot of that has to do with their personality, their support system, if they've experienced cumulative traumas. But it's just important to know that it's really a personal experience and a personal reaction. And so some people may bounce back from trauma, so to speak, apparently easily, and some may really spiral downward after a trauma. I came across this quote I was taught this quote in a training a couple years ago by Dr. Julie Gentili from down in Dayton. She's really an incredible trauma expert, and she likes to share this quote that says, "The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong at the broken places." And when she's talking about trauma and recovery and resilience, that really applies. And so I kind of was thinking about that quote and thinking about this. Hopefully you can see these graphics on the screen. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but I think it's kintsugi, which is the Japanese practice of mending broken objects with gold. And the cultural belief that when something has suffered damage and has a history, it actually becomes more beautiful. And I've got a video I'd like to share with you. So I'll pull that up. Actually got a couple of videos up here, so let me get to the right one. Okay. I'm dealing with multiple windows here, so pardon my delay here. Okay, let me know if you can hear this when it comes through.
We know that trauma can be repressed, but it can't be erased. Lasting reconciliation is achieved by emotional self-awareness, by embracing the change agents of trauma and how they irreversibly reorganize elements of personality, identity, and social reality. This idea, the idea of embracing our wounds, our brokenness, is manifested quite poetically in the Japanese mending practice of kintsugi, literally meaning golden joinery. Kintsugi is the art of fixing broken pottery with lacquer resin dusted or mixed with powdered gold. Asian cultures have a long history in lacquerware, though it matured into a sophisticated art in the Chinese Shang dynasty. The earliest discovered lacquered object dates to the Neolithic Hamudu culture in the 5th millennium BC. Older than the Earth itself, according to young Earth creationists. Pretty impressive. Could be alien. The various delicate arts of lacquerware ramified and expanded down millenniums and cultures. The story of kintsugi reportedly begins in the 15th century with the Japanese military commander. The story goes that famous shogun Ashikaga Yoshimasa broke one of his prized Chinese tea bowls. So he sent the item back to China for repair. What he got in return was his bowl mended with bulky and ugly metal staples. Dismayed, Yoshimasa prompted Japanese craftsmen to search for a more aesthetic means of repair. The art of kintsugi became famous for turning broken objects into pieces more beautiful than the original product. There are even rumors of people breaking their own possessions on purpose so that they can be mended using this lovely technique. The philosophy here follows from a broader Japanese aesthetic called wabi-sabi that finds beauty not in traditional Western ideals of symmetry or geometry, but in Buddhist concepts of impermanence and imperfection. The fractures on a ceramic bowl don't represent the end of that object's life, but rather an essential moment in its history. The flaws of its shape aren't hidden from inspection, but emblazoned with golden significance. Maybe Hemingway had kintsugi on his mind when he wrote that famous line from A Farewell to Arms. The world breaks everyone, and afterward, many are strong in the broken places. The amazing art of kintsugi, a fading art like so many handcrafts, symbolizes the truth that repair requires transformation, that the pristine is less beautiful than the broken, and that the shape of us is impossible to see until it's fractured, until a wound like a crack runs its length. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Kintsugi is just another example of the profound differences in Western and Eastern aesthetics and thought.
Okay, we're gonna stop there. So if it's not too early in the presentation, I would love to get any feedback, thoughts from watching that video. Are you familiar with the practice of kintsugi, or is this kind of a new thing? So anybody brave enough wanting to come off mute and share would be just, your reaction would be great. Someone in the chat said, I thought that was great. Okay, good, thank you.
Guess I'll be brave enough.
Okay.
Yeah, my name's Brian. I really like the Hemingway quote. There's so many times where I look back on my life and I'm so full of regret, but you know, that's not me anymore. And the idea of restoration and redemption have always appealed to me. So, you know, I really, that whole concept struck a chord with me. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Yeah, I thought it was a beautiful analogy, a beautiful picture of how brokenness can be transformative. Yeah, I'm gonna think more about that and use that in the future. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks.
I think it's a great idea. I think I never heard of it before, but I sort of am looking at it from doing the after COVID or as we move on. And also we're in the process of calling a new pastor. So that process sort of applies there too.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. I think it's interesting just kind of contrasting Western ideals of beauty and perfection with this Eastern idea. And I think that our culture in America is very fixated on having this, you know, look of perfection. Everything's fine, you know, use a filter on your photos and just, you know, don't let them see you sweat, like all these cliches. But we have become very good at avoiding talking about and showing our imperfections and our pain. But I don't think that's really helping anyone heal, and it can make us feel very alone in our pain or in our healing journey. I'm just kind of diving into deep stuff here, so hopefully you're like, but it's even in the church, I don't think that it's talked about a lot. And so I hope by the end of this presentation that we can kind of discuss ways that we can be ambassadors for encouraging more healing and encouraging open communication about the fact that we all have stuff in our life and broken parts, and that's okay. And really the whole gospel story and redemption, isn't that what it's all about? So I'll pop our PowerPoint back on here and we'll move on. Okay, so there's our pictures of the bowls. So pretty. So another quote I came across: in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. And that's Viktor Frankl's quote in Man's Search for Meaning. And I think that there's this desire and drive to try and make sense out of suffering. And when we've gone through something hard, a lot of times it can be very healing to us to try and look on the bright side, not to deny what happened, not to deny that hard things occurred, but whether if we just kind of wallow in that forever and never look for the growth and the benefit, maybe we don't have as much meaning. And then I found this scripture in Romans 5 that talks about, you know, our tribulations bring about perseverance, and perseverance proving character, and proving character hope, and hope does not disappoint. And this is just one of many passages in the Bible that talk about, you know, how sometimes we have to go through trials and hard things, but they're not without a purpose in the long run, and that we can develop ourselves, our strengths, our character, and hope. So resilience might be a word that you're familiar with. We talk about resilience a lot, and it's important. And it's kind of been defined as coming back to baseline after trauma, or bouncing back, although I don't know that anyone bounces back, but it's whether or not a person is able to recover quickly from difficulties. And we talk about ways to promote resilience in different trainings that we do. But today I want to talk a little bit beyond just resilience, about flourishing, which I would define as improving and growing beyond baseline after trauma. And I'm not saying that this happens easily or quickly, but can we grow and improve even beyond just coming back to where we were before we were broken or experienced something hard? So to return to baseline and heal from trauma, some would say these are kind of steps that need to be involved. Naming the trauma, like actually realizing, acknowledging that it happened, normalizing the experience of trauma, that you're not the only one that this has happened to, and ensuring stability, safety, and containment. So kind of, you know, just making sure after that situation that the person is safe and stable, And then integrating the trauma in affirming and meaningful ways. A lot of times when something really significant happens, it's almost like a delineation line, you know, and you may even refer to, you know, before the accident was this happened, you know, this is my life, and after the accident it was this way. So you've integrated that in the story of your life, but hopefully we grow towards having that be an affirming or meaningful integration. And then moving forward with intentionality. And we're going to talk about ways to do that as well. A key factor in being able to come back and then flourish after trauma is processing through the trauma. And so really, if we're able to fully explore our thoughts and feelings surrounding what happened, we're going to be able to grow. They call it cognitive exploration. So spending time being curious about confusing situations helps us to find new meaning. So post-traumatic growth studies have been done, and participants that reported positive growth reported it in these areas. Several had a renewed appreciation for life after going through a trauma. Several found new possibilities for themselves from maybe skills or character traits that they developed through going through it. They felt more personal strength. They experienced improved relationships, and they felt spiritually more satisfied. Reasons for that: there's personal factors that they've been studied that show the likelihood that a person will be more likely to come out of a situation with post-traumatic growth. So self-efficacy is the first one, and that's really the idea that a person believes in his or her capacity to affect change in their life, that they are not just a victim, but they can take some charge of a situation and make a change. Also emotional regulation, being able to regulate our emotions, expressing, self-expression, having some confidence, being self-acceptant, the health of the person, and then past experiences. So past experiences of overcoming can be very helpful when we look through, you know, going through a trauma, especially when we think, you know, we say to ourselves, we've done this before. It stinks, but we can do this again. You know, we can make it through this. So those are personal factors that will lead to post-traumatic growth. Environmental factors that encourage post-traumatic growth are listed here. And as I read through them, I would love for you to just kind of see the common denominator. So environmental factors are family, personal relationships, friends, colleagues, supervisors, teachers or guides, the community or our community, financial resources, and the neighborhood. So to me, there's kind of a common denominator in all of those. And anybody see it right away? The environmental factors that encourage post-traumatic growth.
Well, the word relationships jumps out to me. Those are all relational.
Absolutely. Yeah, other human beings, right? And so environmental factors, being human beings, doesn't that kind of mean that we need humans in our environment to help us towards post-traumatic growth? That's what I took away from this study. And other than financial resources, everything else is connected to a person with a heartbeat. So what happens to us is often beyond our control, but who we choose to be with during times of stress may make all the difference in life. And I encourage you to think about times that you've gone through hardship and what has made the difference, or who has made the difference for you. And I would venture to guess that a lot of what you were able to overcome was really positively influenced by who was around you, supporting you through that. So the paradox, I entitled this, the paradox of post-traumatic growth. The paradox is that many things that lead to growth go against our natural inclination to avoid the uncomfortable. It's not really fun to lean into pain and to deal with painful memories or thoughts or fears. And so really this whole idea of post-traumatic growth requires us to shed our natural defense mechanisms and approach discomfort head on. And only then can we really get stepped towards the growth part of it. So the changing our mindset to view everything as fodder for growth, which is easier said than done. Experiential avoidance, and I would say this is kind of a diagnosis that society has. We are not very comfortable with dealing with difficult emotions. If you disagree with me, please pipe up or jump in, because I'm just kind of giving my view of things, my opinion. But I think that we're very good at avoiding the uncomfortable between cell phones and online distractions, which are kind of, I think, one of our biggest things that we carry around with us every day. But we have other ways that we avoid, even just being in our homes away from people, or self-medicating in different ways. We don't like to deal with sadness or grief or anger. But when we try and inhibit those emotions, dealing with them, it actually makes things worse, because avoiding them reinforces the belief that the world is not a safe place. It also makes it difficult for us to reach long-term goals, because we kind of get into this self-preservation mode where we just kind of hunker down like a turtle and tuck our head in and just avoid. But by avoiding, we're also missing out on opportunities for growth and generating positive experiences and coming to some idea of the meaning of what we went through. So, experiential avoidance. I like this little graphic here on the screen. It's kind of supposed to describe therapy, but I think it fits here too. So sometimes when we've been through something traumatic or just difficult, we ruminate on things just automatically. Our brains often just kind of replay conversations in our head, or maybe we're having dreams about something. It's like our brain trying to make sense of what we're going through. It can seem very intrusive and repetitive, especially at the beginning, but over time, it becomes more organized, and our thoughts become more deliberate. And really, the experts on post-traumatic growth say that rumination, along with strong social support, can be very beneficial to growth. And we can tap into strength and compassion that we may not have known existed within us. So in this example, in this little image here, this woman is sharing, what seems like a jumble, but through the process of speaking those words out loud, or having someone, for support, who looks like they're reflecting back to you. Oh, so what you're saying, that's part of this ball of yarn over here, sometimes just having someone who will listen can really help us organize our thoughts and move forward. Research also supports the immense benefit of engaging in art therapy or expressive writing to help facilitate the rebuilding process after trauma. And I know Nami has an awesome program. 2 of my children and I have volunteered as creative expression volunteers. But art therapy is just amazing, getting kind of lost in creating an object, a piece of art, but expressing part of yourself. So powerful. And then writing about a topic that comes along with strong emotions for 15 to 20 minutes a day, so journaling or whatever you want to call it. This has been shown to help people create meaning from their stressful experiences and better express their positive and negative emotions. So organizing those thoughts or even not organizing, just expressing them on the paper. Maybe it's just bullet journaling, and getting them out of your mind can be very healing and help kind of create meaning through. So a couple of examples of post-traumatic growth might be, a couple who remarried after losing their first spouse. Because of what they've gone through in the loss of the first spouse, they often develop a deeper and more transparent relationship, because the earlier trauma they faced drives them to value the present and improve the quality of the interpersonal relationships they have now. Another illustration of post-traumatic growth might be parents who have lost their child to cancer. We often see, through that just heartbreaking devastation, that they want to help others who have been where they have been and make meaning out of their child's loss. Not that that fixes it, not that it makes it so that it didn't happen, but so many times I feel like, our ministry is where we've been broken and we've had healing, and then we can offer and share that with others. So post-traumatic growth acts as a shield against mental breakdown. It reduces the impact of grief and stress in the future. And studies show that individuals who transformed post-traumatic growth had more life satisfaction and a better quality of life. So I kind of would like to just stop for a minute and get some feedback on what I've shared so far, if it rings a bell with you, or you have any examples of people that you've known who've maybe taken a really difficult situation and turned it around. So opening the floor.
I'd like to speak if you don't mind.
Absolutely, please.
My name is Mary Finch. I work for Nami, Greater Toledo.
Hi, Nami.
I coordinate a program called Kid Shop, Teen Shop for school-age kids 7 to 12 and 13 to 17. And you were talking about healing trauma, post-traumatic growth.
Mm-hmm.
I always try to find someone who can speak to the kids as well as the parent about post-traumatic growth, because most of the parents that send in an application for their child to attend Kid Shop, Teen Shop, they are dealing with adopted kids and foster kids who have gone through trauma and is going through the trauma of accepting the fact that they've been removed from one place and into another. They have to get used to new guardians, and they are going through some form of trauma. And I always try to get something set up for the kids to have someone talk to them while they're with their parents, and especially with the spirituality piece. So I wanted to know, if I could start communicating with you in order to maybe set up something for the parents and the children together, whereas they could tune in and you could talk to them about the trauma piece, the healing trauma, the post-traumatic growth, because they are dealing with a lot of that with their foster kids and adopted children. And we get a lot of children and foster parents out of CSB, and they know that their child is going through that. And we try to touch upon all subjects that kind of what the kids are going through. In our program, we deal with the kids more, simply because we try to engage them to get them to talk. But when they go through certain things like trauma, post-traumatic, and they need post-traumatic growth, they need someone to talk to them about that. We try to find people who can talk to them about that, and you're doing that excellently, as a matter of fact. And with the spirituality included, I think that would be a good thing for our parents to have something like that. So I'd like to communicate with you later on about getting the parents and the children together to tune into a Zoom invite, and you talk to them about what you're talking to us about today.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I would love to help out any way I could. And as you were speaking, I have a couple of colleagues in mind too that I think would be helpful in giving their perspective and their experience as well. Yeah, it's so important. And you know, I guess what I wouldn't say is that this is the short goal. This is like a long-term kind of process. You know, to make meaning out of hardship doesn't happen right away. And sometimes it could be a lifetime, but we can definitely work towards it. So I think healing first, you know, and coping with the immediate, and then and simultaneously, I guess, developing more ways to cope. And as we, especially kids, right, as they grow and get a better understanding of what they went through and their cognition and developmental levels increase, I think they'll be able to more kind of grasp things and understand what was going on, but they can continue to grow as well. But absolutely, Mary, I mean, we can definitely set up a time to talk and work towards helping out those kiddos and their parents.
And you can let your colleagues know that we can set up a series of talks.
Okay.
I know that you can't do everything in one meeting, you know, and people will have lots of questions. So, and we can set up a series of talks. I think the parents would respond very well to that.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Thanks, yeah, thank you. Other thoughts or examples that come to mind? Do you have, you know, people that you've known maybe that just seem like they've been through such a hard time and they've come out on the other side with this enthusiasm or this mission or ministry or something else? But if anybody has anything they'd like to share, I just wanted to open the floor here.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we can get to a place after we've experienced something difficult and traumatic where we can influence other people and use that experience, you know, to kind of enter into those situations. It's kind of a sign of this post-traumatic growth, you know, kind of thing. So when I was 9 years old, my 13-year-old sister was electrocuted, tragically killed, you know, instantly, which, yeah, so, you know, affects the family really intensely and for years and years. And so I can speak from, and my dad was a pastor, right? I still don't know how he got up a month later and preached his first sermon, you know, but processing that and what that did to our family, where we delayed our grief, you know, you just kind of get into a routine. And I would say for me personally, it was about 15 years until I really dove into the grief process. When I went to seminary, and that was how I was able to kind of process. Now, in the work that I do feel it's kind of a mission of mine to enter into people's stuff with them, because I can relate, especially in issues of grief and loss. And so that does resonate, you know, with me, and has been kind of a theme through my life, that I just end up in positions where that's my job. So, and it pains me when folks don't do the processing, you know, because it hurts so deeply. Like, I can't face the emotion, or it hurts too much, or, which I get, you know, it does. But if you don't walk through the fire, if you don't walk through the emotion, you don't get to the other side where there is joy and smiles and life again. And so, yes, that just seems to be a recurring theme in my life. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Sherry. I mean, wow, you know, the way that a devastating event that, you know, just shaped your whole childhood on the way up, but how, you know, God has used that to bring comfort and guidance maybe to other people who unfortunately have experienced similar things. It's sad and beautiful, you know, the, I guess, redeeming a scenario and allowing other people to get some healing. And I don't understand how all of that works, but you know, kind of gives me goosebumps. But thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And I see the, you know, the picture of the pot with the gold, you know, kind of strengthening the creases just really resonates me today. That makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful analogy, you know, poetic picture of a story. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. All right. Any other thoughts or comments before we move on? Okay. So the next couple slides are actually cut and paste from the post-traumatic growth inventory. And these are just, I was hoping to, you know, give you all a chance to read over those. And these statements and people kind of evaluated after kind of processing through. These were statements that reflected the growth that they had experienced. So you see here about priorities. So maybe priorities in a person's life change after a trauma, greater appreciation for the value of your life, maybe new interests, and maybe that has something to do with helping other people who have, or maybe it's a skill or something that you've taken up as a result of what you've been through. A greater feeling of self-reliance, a better understanding of spiritual matters, more clearly being able to count on people in times of trouble, or established the feeling of establishing a new path for your life. So those are kind of the first set of statements. And if anyone has, you know, comments or thoughts, please feel free to unmute and jump in if one of these really resonates or you have something you'd like to share. Let's see. Okay, the second set of statements on the inventory, I have a greater sense of closeness with others. I'm more willing to express my emotions. I know that I can handle difficulties. So that's kind of like, maybe you felt at first like, I can't handle this, but after, you know, after some time, that confidence that you know you can handle difficulties, I can do better things with my life. So maybe after experiencing something hard, kind of gives you permission or kind of the motivation to cut out things that are not so important in your life. The better able to accept the way things work out. Better appreciating each day. Maybe new opportunities are available which wouldn't have been otherwise. And having more compassion for others, as well as putting more effort into my relationships. So I think, you know, on personal development as well as relationally, when we kind of are brought into these difficult situations, you know, afterwards we may make changes with how we set goals for ourselves, what are our priorities, who are our priorities as well. And then the last set here, I'm more likely to try to change things that need changing. I have a stronger religious faith. I discovered that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I learned a great deal about how wonderful people are, and I better accept needing others. So sometimes trauma makes us, you know, rely on others. And I'm using trauma. I mean, it might be something you didn't call trauma, but you get the point, right? Hardship, difficulty, whatever it is. You know, sometimes we like to be very independent. And when we come to a situation where we can't do it alone, at least for a time, and we really do need people. And so we kind of are forced to accept help maybe, but then later on we better accept that. So any thoughts on any of these that we read over? All right. Well, this slide is the cover of a book, which I actually have right here. I read this a few months ago. It's called Suffer Strong, and it's by Jay and Catherine Wolfe. And their story, I mean, if I can just, I don't know, I'm really a big fan. They have a social media presence on Facebook and Instagram, and their story is just really amazing. So you may be able to tell by the picture that Catherine is in a wheelchair. When she was in her mid-20s, she, out of the blue, had a brainstem stroke that really nearly killed her. And I think that was about 15 or 16 years ago now. So this hasn't been an overnight healing. And as you can see, she still has, physical impairments because of this stroke. But these two are believers, and their message of hope and how suffering doesn't have to be the end of the story is just really profound and inspiring. And I have actually a couple of short video clips I would love to share with you. And then if this pricks any piece of your heart, I would really recommend going on YouTube and looking up. They've, spoken at some different mega churches, and a lot of those are recorded on YouTube, maybe, might be 20 to 30 minutes long, but very well worth, just giving that perspective on suffering, suffering as believers, and how we can turn around and come out the other side with growth and hope. So I'm going to pull up one of the videos now. Close that. Sorry, it's like behind my control panel here. Okay. I think I have to stop sharing that and start sharing here. Okay, we'll get there. Can you see the YouTube screen right now? You can. Okay, thank you. All right.
What happens to you in life, as bad or as great as it is, isn't really what matters. It's how you respond. After the out of nowhere brainstem stroke that left me severely disabled, there was no options really than having to redefine my understanding of everything in this world. Healing was a concept that I only understood as being if you are exactly like what is considered normal. If we had to go through something hellacious, why not move forward in strength and take it with us and really use this? And instead of seeing this as some terrible punishment or some like horrible thing and you're really bitter about it, instead, seeing it as a privilege. It's really an honor to get to suffer well and show the world what it means to really suffer well, to wait well, to hope well, things that in our world people are not about. People are not about anything that isn't perfect and pretty and like they thought it was going to be. I 100% felt angry almost in the beginning. That's totally gone away now, but angry probably at God, at the world, at my situation. Like, this cannot be what healing looks like. But the deepest healing that I needed was to change that, to understand, like, I may not look healed to the world, but my heart is healed. I do not feel any anger, any anguish, any bitterness at all. All of those feelings have been entirely covered by a deep hope. I think we have to redefine words, understandings, concepts to make sense of our lives and to really walk in freedom. So choosing joy is never about denying reality. And my joy is also rooted in the reality of the world, that things are hard. Life is painful, that it's not going to be perfect and one note and awesome all the time. And I think that is so important to recognize, is when we can have lowered expectations of what our lives will look like, we can overwhelm our expectations about how awesome things are.
Okay. So, thoughts about what you just saw? I mean, I know that was just a little snippet, but was there anything that she said that resonated with you?
Hey, good morning. This is Jean Dries. How are you?
Hi, Jean. I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. You know, that really resonated with me. We have a very good friend from our church whose son is slowly dying at 26 from brain cancer. And in the intimate group that she's let in, there are some just heartbreaking photos and heartwarming photos. And I think that theme of suffering, you know, in a positive way. I mean, the lives they are touching by showing the love and just the capturing of every moment of college friends and everyone, you know, we all have shirts that we wear in strength of his, and it is a terminal diagnosis. It's just, I can't put into words probably just how inspirational it is to now probably cry, to see the love that this mom and dad have for their 26-year-old son who's not going to be with us much longer. And as everybody puts pictures from around, actually the world, depending on who they knew of, this shirt with the kid's sketch on the front, it's called the Mitchell Project, in honor of him. And again, just the graceful, loving Christian way they're watching their son suffer, and ultimately he will not, as the doctor said, be here in a few months. So I don't know, I guess I had thoughts of sharing something from this in a heartfelt way back to the mother, because you know, you saw a picture of her head on his chest last night as he's embracing his mom and kind of comforting his mom. It just puts everything else in perspective, right?
Yeah.
So that resonated with me, and I think I'll try and find the right words to reach out to her later today and just tell her what inspiration, or just how many lives they're impacting with the loving, gracious way they're helping their son on his final journey. Thanks.
Thank you, Jean. Thanks for sharing that. Very touching. And, you know, I don't know why bad things, well, I know sometimes why bad things happen, but we don't have to, you know, we have a choice, I guess, and we can try our best with our limited human understanding, you know, to grow from it, to grow closer to the Lord from it, to inspire and share with others and comfort them. Yeah. And I like what Catherine said, you know, who said life is going to be perfect and beautiful? And when we stop thinking that way and stop showing our highlight reel on social media, like nobody wants to put the behind the scenes stuff that's, you know, it's been a horrible day and my house isn't perfect and my hair's not done, whatever, you know. I feel like we need to be more real with each other, and the church needs to be more real. Could go on a whole soapbox about that, but I do want to share another video clip. This one is a short little trailer that Catherine and her husband Jay did, because he's been her caretaker for 15 years, and the book is written every other chapter. They take turns. So really the perspectives of both of them is really powerful, because maybe we're not the one who has suffered the trauma ourselves, but we're the caretaker or the, partner. So that perspective I think is important too. So here's Catherine and Jay.
It always ends up making you laugh.
We do it on the way to school, and our kids are so weirded out by it. I'm like, we shared this story of struggle, the story of suffering as humans, but more than that, we share this story of strength, this possibility that there's more in the story, that there's something new. The suffering is not the end of the story, but it's the beginning of a new one. And this is a story we get to remember together. We get to not only just tell ourselves in our heads and our hearts, but to tell each other through our lives that there is more.
We believe we all have wheelchairs. Internally, we all have invisible wheelchairs, we call them. We all have things inside of us, brokenness, hard stories, hard memories, tough stuff we're wrestling with in life, and no one sees these, but I believe invisible wheelchairs are inside all of us. My upended life has revealed my second chance life. The redefining of me has become the refined me. And I truly love my life. I want to cherish it and champion it, even the parts I would never have imagined. And I want to live it well to the very end. And may it be so for us all.
That made me teary-eyed. I cannot, get the book and read it. It's really amazing. It has really impacted me personally, just with some things that I've been through and just the perspective and from a spiritual standpoint that they can share. It's just really been an encouragement to me to just hear their story and see where they are now. But they will tell, one of their little interviews is called "I'm Terrible, Thanks for Asking." And I thought that was so funny, but so true. Like, why do we put on, I know why, but why do we put on these masks and just say, "Oh, great, how are you?" There's maybe a time and a place where it's socially appropriate to share, but here I kind of wanted to transition into faith communities specifically, and are we being a place that is promoting post-traumatic growth, and are we being a welcoming, healing place, and how can we do that? So I will offer some suggestions and things that I came up with in the PowerPoint, but I would love to hear your thoughts, and maybe you're already doing great things in your faith community and really supporting people, or maybe we can brainstorm together better ways to help people heal. We know there's hurting people out there in so many different ways. So there's the cover from their book. So a lot of research has shown that religious coping methods are consistently associated with improved psychological outcomes, including acceptance and hope and optimism and life satisfaction in spiritual growth and stress-related growth or post-traumatic growth. So, you've probably heard of, people who are sick that believe in the power of prayer, their health, maybe they aren't always healed, but there's been so many studies about, even the amount of pain they may feel and their quality of life and maybe healing and coming out. We know that there's a spiritual connection and that our bodies and our minds and our spirits are all intertwined. So when we are impacted by a trauma, it's going to impact us spiritually, but we have spiritual ways to cope as well. There's a 4 R's kind of description of a trauma-informed organization or a trauma-informed mental health practitioner. So I'm saying that these are also the 4 R's of a trauma-informed faith community. And 4 of the first things that we can do to help support people to move to post-traumatic growth is we need to realize that trauma is widespread and that it's probably touched everyone in our congregation or temple or wherever we meet. We need to recognize signs and symptoms of trauma in members of the community. I think that goes to the education piece and understanding that sometimes things that we might see and behaviors that we might see could be the best way that a person knows how to cope with what's going on at the time. And we need to respond by integrating, taking our knowledge and pulling it into community practices. So maybe that's creating a new opportunity, a new group, a new outreach within your faith community. I don't know what that is, but taking the knowledge and actually doing something with it, right? Walking the walk. And then resisting ways that might re-traumatize people. And if there was something that that was a practice or something that was disturbing in the faith community that would re-traumatize someone, we would avoid doing that, of course. So how could faith communities support post-traumatic growth? And I think Sherry mentioned this. Helping people heal is messy. We got to get our hands dirty, and we need to realize that, if we are going to get in relationship with people who have been through hard things, it's not going to be convenient. It's not going to be maybe between the hours of 8:30 and 4:30. It might be late at night. It might be on the weekends. It might be at the hospital. It might be whatever, fill in the blank. And so helping people requires us to get our hands dirty. I also think that we need to take off the masks, and churches have been kind of accused of being a place where people act like everything's perfect and they dress in their Sunday best or whatever. And I think we need to move past that and acknowledge that everyone is struggling, and it's okay to struggle. And it doesn't make you less spiritual to have hard things in your life. Maybe you have hard things in your life because you're more spiritual. I don't know. And we need to remove the stigma around loss and around trauma and around mental health and all kinds of things. We need to talk about these things. And that's sometimes uncomfortable for people who just either their generation or the environment, the community that they've been in. A couple other ideas, maybe host or facilitate grief and loss groups within your congregation. And there's lots of resources around Lucas County. Even some of our hospices offer some free services. Even if the person wasn't served by the hospice, they will still offer bereavement counseling. There's just lots of really good resources in and around Toledo. Maybe utilizing something like a care group, or I don't know what the wording is in different groups, but kind of like a little small group to promote community connection and support, and just check in with each other. For all of our technological devices, sometimes we've lost that more personal touch. And so is there a way that we get ourselves organized to intentionally check in on each other? And maybe that's everybody in the faith community, or maybe it's specific to people who are suffering in a specific way. If there's other thoughts that you have, this is definitely not all inclusive, but I would love to hear them. If there's been ways that other congregations have kind of circled around people who are hurting or offered opportunities for healing, feel free to unmute and jump in. Okay.
Jennifer, I think these are all, great ideas. sometimes I wonder about how we do it, and we're moving into a place this kind of, it's not even post-COVID yet, but the issues of moving back into in-person worship just seem to be having significant stress on our faith leaders. It doesn't matter what side you're on, whether you believe COVID is real or not. You know, there are members on both sides,
Right.
who, you know, and how to balance that. You know, how do you keep folks safe while attempting to move back into in-building, you know, in-person worship or parking lot worship, or that church is doing it this way, why aren't we church? They're open, why aren't we open? You know, all of the, it's just so complicated on so many levels. And I think grief and loss is huge. And I really do hope that we can provide some resources for our faith leaders in that area. I don't think we're even we're not even there yet, you know, for the real grief and loss issues that I think that we're going to experience. But the anxiety that I've heard our faith leaders speaking about this, you know, how do we minister to and with people with so many different political views, and you know, on top of the do we come together, do we not come together? You know, there's just so many layers right now.
Yeah, you're right. If there's other comments, feel free to jump in here. Yeah, this is a difficult time. It's a difficult time for churches, and so my suggestions, I guess, I would think would, well, first of all, so reducing the stigma and talking about it, that could happen via sermons, whether they're online or in person. That's kind of my thoughts behind it. You know, I mean, we're all getting pretty good at Zoom, so maybe it's connecting people with Zoom support groups or Zoom, you know, bereavement groups or whatever. I think people are getting really creative in ways to reach out, and maybe we would prefer to be in person and give hugs, but this is nice too, right? We can see each other and communicate, and it's the best we have right now, but it's meeting a need for sure. So that community, even via virtual connection, is still beneficial until we can have what we would rather have, maybe. But yeah, I want to validate that. I realize this is a hard time to, I mean, there's just so much still up in the air and uncertain, and like you said, the different viewpoints that people have complicates it for sure.
But your message that it's important that we process through this, like, you know, we can't come through this and not talk about it and act like it didn't happen, or just try to keep going back to the way it was. You know, we're not going to get to any kind of growth or health on the other side if we do that. So, you know, so this message of have conversations, you know, figure it out, support each other, talk, is just really, really so important.
Thanks. I just had a couple more slides I wanted to share, and then I'm wrapping up here, so let me minimize this again. I found a really good article that I stole this from. So Rachel White was the author of the article, and she shared these 3 tips. So communicating well. She says, how we minister to traumatized people matters. When we understand the impact of trauma upon human life, we can begin a new way of communicating with the traumatized. We need to know people. We need to promote choice and trust, collaboration, empowerment, and safety, and open the way for conversations that restore dignity and the power of choice to survivors. You know, trauma, nobody chooses to be a victim of trauma, whatever kind of trauma that might be. And so one of the most healing things to give a survivor is choice, because that having a sense of control over our lives is really important to us. So she also says, be a companion, get involved, deeply involved in the rebuilding process of a life. At any church, there are people who have been seeking God and safe human connection after experiencing abuse, loss, or other traumas. Even childhood victims of trafficking, now grown up, have blended into the crowd and come desperately seeking relief from their pain. They're in your church too, and they need us. And she had some really awesome things to share about her outreach to survivors of trafficking specifically. She says, abuse creates lies that break down relationships, lies about worth and purpose and potential, and they hinder healthy human connection. Believers, faith communities, are beautifully positioned to be present and build trust and model faithfulness in relationships, creating a safe space for victims to explore redeeming love and peace and purpose for their lives. I just thought that was really beautiful, and really, you know, the whole message and kind of what we should be about as faith communities, in my opinion. And then her last comment was to offer practical care. Help trauma survivors create stability in their lives. Help them identify needs and offer practical help. Help them know that they are not alone. The traumatized need our tender, loving care, good Samaritan kind of care, care that shows up and costs us something. They need an investment by us, proof that they are worth it. And I think, you know, so many times when we're in the middle of just the craziness of a trauma or a tragedy, life seems so confusing, and we just need someone to walk with us through that. And we can be that for people who have experienced hardship, and long-term that can lead to post-traumatic growth and flourishing.